Okay, so let's dig into the FARBAR rider B as in boy. This is what's called the Homeowners Association Community Disclosure. This has become kind of a hot topic lately, so you need to make sure you pay attention to it. One thing I'm going to do, if we look at, once again, we have the marked up version of this with that I'm going to be going over here, should be attached to this video, so you should be able to download it. I encourage you, if you're going to study this, to print it out, and that way you can make your own notes on it as well. But as always, I say at the top, be sure to listen to the audio portion, as I'm able to say a lot more than I am to type in the smaller boxes. But let's dig in. Off the top too, make sure you're going to hear me reference how this is similar to the condo rider in some cases. Well, just understand that it's different, but there are similarities. So if you haven't watched or are not familiar or have a good working knowledge of the condo rider, which is rider A as an apple, then you might want to watch that class as well so you can see the similarities and the differences. All right, so obviously seller, buyer, and property description, pretty standard. Here, I'm going to start off right here, and I have my first highlight is under buyer's initials. This is just like the condo rider. The buyer should not initial or sign this until the seller has disclosed properly and the information on this form is accurate and complete. So let's go attack it from two sides. If you're representing the seller, you should have this filled out and gather all this information and have the seller complete this and initial it and have it ready to go. Because just like the condo rider, the buyer has 3 days from receipt of this, even if it's 3 weeks into the contract, that we finally get this to them completed, then the buyer has 3 days from that date to basically cancel and get out of the contract based upon the information that's in here. And so you don't want that as a seller's agent or as a seller or as a listing agent. You want them to be obligated as soon as possible. So the key would be to have this ready on the front side and have it ready to go. Plus, that gives you time to dig up this information. From the buyer side, unfortunately, you're going to run into many sellers who do not have this information ready to go. You should not fill this out because it's not your buyer disclosing, it's the seller disclosing. So even stuff that's available on the MLS, oh, I was able to pull it off. They said in the MLS that it's there. Well, that has nothing to do with anything. What you need to do is just like a seller's disclosure is you need to have the seller complete this and fill it out in its entirety and give you the details. And when your buyer is satisfied that they have accurate information, then they can go ahead and initial it and make it part of it. So just be aware, okay? So don't sign this if it's not complete and do not include it. Now, what I encourage people to do, if there's not one that's already completed, then you include a blank one with your offer, saying, hey, here's my offer. We can get this started, but in the meantime, the buyer is going to require that the seller complete this homeowners association disclosure, right? There are a lot more things in a homeowners association than you know, so these are things that need to be verified, all right? Quick note here, if the disclosure summary has not been provided to the purchaser before executing the contract, it's voidable, as we talked about, by delivering written notice to the seller. You have to be written notice to cancel within 3 days after receipt of the disclosure summary or prior to closing, whichever comes first. There is no right to extend closing in this case, but you would not have to close. The condo rider has the right to extend closing. And then buyers should not execute this contract once again until they've received and read this disclosure filled out. A blank one doesn't do us any good. All right. So as we go through these, let's just go through them quickly. It's just noticing, okay, the seller should include the name of the community, Paddock Farms or whatever it is, right, that has a homeowners association. It's noting to the buyer that they know that they're in a community, they're obligated to be part of the homeowners association. By the way, you may have still need to be part of the homeowners association, even if there are no fees. Sometimes they have associations. If there's no fees in there, you still have to fill this out because there are things that still could apply. There have been or will be recorded restrictive covenants. We should be able to find those online because they have to, if they're a homeowner association, record those. If its developer hasn't recorded them yet, then he should be able to provide that for you. As a buyer, this is what the seller is telling the buyer. You'll be obligated to pay assessments to the current association. Assessments may be subject periodic change. The current amount is blank per month or per quarter, per year. You'll also be able to pay any special assessment opposed by the association. Such special assessments may be subject, if applicable, the current amount is if they know of any pending or of any special assessments. Now, it doesn't get so deep into what they could or don't know. If you remember, the condo rider has some things that even if it showed up in the last 12 months on the agenda of the condo association, then that would have to be disclosed. Here in this case, that's not the case, but if they do know of any special assessments in addition to the monthly, quarterly, or annual amount, they have to let them know that. Here, number 4, you may be obligated to pay special assessments to the respective municipality. Sometimes, West Chase, for instance, in the Tampa area is a illustration of a CDD, a community development district, and sometimes those are included in the tax bill, other times they are not. So that is what you're telling the buyer, that that's a possibility as well. You are telling the buyer, meaning the seller is telling the buyer. The buyer needs to take notice that failure to pay could result in a lien on their property. All right, that is being told to them by having this disclosure. All right, there may be an obligation to pay rent or land use fees for recreational other stuff. So in addition to the other things, maybe there's some type of the way they've structured this association is that there is some type of what they call a recreational or land use fee. It means a lot of times it's Greek to most people, but the seller needs to let us know if they know of any. The developer may have right to amend the restrictive covenants without the approval of the association membership. So you need to look at how it's structured. If it's still in the developer is the main person phase on a new builds, for instance. Number 8 and 9 says the statements contained in the disclosure are only summary, and as a prospective buyer, you should refer to the covenants and the association governing documents before purchasing the property. You do not, again, as an agent, you do not interpret those. You just go help them to get them. And then number 9 tells them where they can. These documents are either matters of public record, which they should be if it's been recorded and turned over to the homeowners, and can be obtained from the record office in the county, or are not recorded and can be obtained from the developer, okay, if it's still in the developer-owned phase of it. Okay, notice here that the buyer is the one that has to sign this because the seller, all they've done is initial it, so they're giving the buyer another obligation to sign. Once again, buyers should not sign until they are satisfied that it is complete, and it's good information that the seller provided that. Now, Part B is going to have, you're going to see some very similar verbiage as to the condo rider. This applies if approval is required. The homeowners association requires approval. Far less homeowners associations require approval than condo associations. However, there are occasions where they are, so you need to make note of that and what the process is. Who does it 5 days? The buyer shall pay the application fees and get going on that right away. They're not going to let that delay. Seller starts the process, gives it to them, all that, okay? It does say down here if approval is not granted within the stated time period, the buyer may terminate, and then the buyer's released from the contract. They get their earnest money back. Here, number 2 is if there are some fees for startup or application. So you see 3 different things here. Buyer shall pay any application, initial contribution, more like a startup fee, and or membership or other fees charged by the association pursuant to its governing documents. Okay, those should be listed here. So let's say there is an application fee. It's $50 per, I would say, instance, like only it's going to happen once for application to, and that should be filled out to the Paddock Farms Homeowners Association, whatever. Okay, so you need, again, the seller should be able to figure this out and find it out. If you're representing a seller and it's in an association, have them do this. This is part of your job. This is what you need to do, okay? Anyways, you would list these things individually. Here, again, very similar in paragraph 2, subparagraph B, if levied or other special assessments exist as the effective date, or an assessment is levied after the effective date. So if they told us about it, we knew about the assessment, or one got levied within a week after we went to contract, any are to be paid in installments, then the seller shall pay all installments due before closing. All right, okay. And buyer or seller, like on the condo, shall pay installments due after closing. If seller, okay, so what we're saying, let's say again, let's just use that they come up with $1,000 assessment. It's going to be paid over the next 2 years, every 6 months. So one of those has already been paid. So now there's $250 paid, another $750 left. The next $750 is going to be due after the buyer has taken possession of the property. And if you check buyer, then the buyer will be responsible for those $250. 6 months from now, another $250, another $250, right? If you check seller, will pay, right? Again, depends on who you represent. Then the seller would have to get that all cleaned up, even if it's for 2 years or 10 years for the next, okay? If the seller is checked, it says if seller is checked, seller shall pay the assessment in full prior to or at the time of closing. So they'll get it all cleaned up. And then here is where the seller should be able to tell us who we can contact to get further information about the association, who to make checks out to, who to make application with. That stuff should be there. Again, if you represent the seller, make sure you do that. All right, so a lot shorter than the condo rider, but still very similar to it, and very prevalent. Most homes have an association, and so with that, you need to be aware of what the rules are, what takes place, and again, can't stress enough, don't have the buyer initial until you feel they feel it is filled out completely and accurately, and then they're comfortable in actually initialing that and signing it so that they've been made aware. All right, so that is that's the FARBAR Rider B, the Homeowners Association disclosure. By the way, remember that until that is delivered, the buyer can void and cancel the contract all the way up to the closing date. So it's not something you want to miss. Thanks.